Alright, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Inshallah, we're going to be continuing with our tafsir and tafsir al-Qurtubi. And we were at وَهُوَ الَّذِي جَعَلَكُمُ النُّجُومَ لِتَهْتَدُوا بِهَا فِي ظُلُمَاتِ الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ. Actually, we left off at فَالِقِ الْإِصْبَاحِ, right? This is where we left off at. And this is what we did in terms of, right there. We left off at حسبانا وجعل الليل سكنا والشمس والقمر حسبانا. This is where we left off at. And we said that there are different qira'at for جعل or جاعل الليل or جاعل. So جعل and جاعل, we went in details with that one. And we talked about the word حسبانا, and we said جعل or والشمس والقمر حسبانا, meaning جعل الشمس والقمر حسبانا. And we said حسبانا, we said differences of opinions on the meaning of حسبان. Does حسبان mean go into a precise orbit, or does it mean that this is talking about a movement and giving us the inference of a particular movement that the Shams and Qamar are going in? Or is this talking about radiating light, whether radiating light meaning glowing light like the sun, or whether it's radiating light and reflecting light like the moon? So at the end, that this basically is basically the lesson to learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's magnificence in basically the different things that we see in nature. And وَهُوَ الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمُ النُّجُومَ لِتَهْتَدُوا بِهَا فِي ظُلُمَاتِ الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ. I want you to look at this one, because this one's saying وَجَعَلَ اللَّيْلَ, and this one's saying وَهُوَ الَّذِي. So why did it say وَهُوَ and this one directly said وَجَعَلَ? So when you say وَجَعَلَ اللَّيْلَ سَكَنًا, you start out the sentence like that, and then the following sentence comes with the same pronoun. That would be an affirmation. Okay, so وَهُوَ الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمُ النُّجُومَ لِتَهْتَدُوا بِهَا, it's to affirm that النُّجُوم, that in other words, the things on earth, or whether we're speaking about the different details of the different celestial beings, as the sun and the moon basically are created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether we're speaking about the precise and how precise the things were created in, or whether we're speaking about the function that they basically function in, that all is basically by the power in the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when you say وَهُوَ الَّذِي جَعَلَكُمُ النُّجُومَ لِتَهْتَدُوا بِهَا, he's the one that created the stars. Wait a minute, stars. لِتَهْتَدُوا بِهَا, in order for you to find guidance in it. So when you say جعل لكم النجوم, first of all, النجوم نجمة. Okay, so anyways, it's a noun. So we're talking about the stars. What's the difference between a star and a moon? So the difference, the stars themselves, they actually are just like the sun. They glow on their own. They're siraj. Okay, so لِتَهْتَدُوا, why لِتَهْتَدُوا? In order to find guidance in it. Okay, so we're finding guidance in a star? How do we find guidance in a star? في ظلمات البر والبحر. Whenever it's dark, on land or sea, you would use stars to basically guide you to know the destinations. But wait a minute, let's look at the other ayat. Because the other ayat were telling us that the reason why the stars were created, it didn't actually say necessarily for al-hidayah alone, which actually explains a number of different reasons why stars were created. In other ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَحِفْظًا مِّن كُلِّ شَيْطَانٍ مَارِدٍ. وَحِفْظًا مِّن كُلِّ شَيْطَانٍ مَارِدٍ. In another ayah, وَجَعَلْنَاهَا رُجُومًا لِلشَّيَاطِينِ. Okay, what does that mean? What's the difference? حِفْظًا means the preservation. that the stars were created to as a preservation from every shaitan that is married. What is a shaitan? A shaitan comes from the root sha-ta-na. What does that mean? Shaitana means to be distant. Shaitan, the distant one. Distant from what? Distant away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. So shaitan, the one that is distant away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. Okay, married comes from the root ma-ra-da. What does that mean? The root ma-ra-da means to be one, disobedient. Two, ma-ra-da also means to revolute against something, to object something. So when you talk about shaitan in marid, you're talking about the ones that, one, that are distant and that had been distant because of their revolution or opposition to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's say, وَجَعَلْنَاهَا رُجُومًا لِلشَّيَاطِينِ. So first of all, the stars were actually لِتَهْتَدُوا. So this is one. Number two, حِفْظًا. It's to give preservation. To give preservation. That's the second thing. That the stars were there in order to preserve the people. To preserve the people from what? From shayateen. Wait a minute. So how do you preserve you're preserving the people, or are you preserving Allah, the sama, the skies? Or what are you actually preserving? Well, let's continue to see. جَعَلْنَاهَا رُجُومًا لِلشَّيَاطِينِ. That the stars were made rujuma. What is rujuma? The root is rajama. The root rajama actually means to throw, and more specifically used to throw a stone at something, to stone. So when you say جَعَلْنَاهَا, we had made the stars as as throwing objects, basically, to target a shayateen. So wait a minute, why are they targeting shayateen anyways? So shayateen, we're talking about specific shayateen, because a shaitan, it could be for a human shaitan, and it could be for a jinn shaitan. Okay? So when it says جَعَلْنَاهَا رُجُومًا لِلشَّيَاطِينِ, made the stars, in other words, one of the object for having stars is to basically be as throwing objects, as the objects that are thrown at shayateen. So shayateen, they basically have different potentials and different forces that you and I don't have. What are those? So the different forces, potentials, we're speaking about the ability to travel at massive speeds, the ability to go even farther than certain areas that as a human being, we're not capable of breathing at a certain distance up in the sky. But they don't survive on the same elements that we survive on. So breathing and perhaps getting into maybe survival needs is completely different for us and them. Shayateen, they do get married, they do have kids, they do reproduce, but they're eating, drinking, food, water, all of that, and even breathing and all of that is completely different than us. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that they are capable of traveling at massive speeds, and these massive speeds, and even high up in the skies, it enables them to basically overhear the conversations that happen between the malaika and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what they used to use in order to get some information for the sorcerers. So sorcerers or people that would relate with the jinn, they used to relate with the jinn in order to get some information that they had overheard in alam al-ghayb, basically in the heavens. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made النجوم to basically target الشياطين, to disable them from hearing the information that happens in the skies. Basically, malaika, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so forth. قد فصلنا الآيات. Now, here's one thing. I know al-Qurtubi actually wanted to make it short. You could see just really 5 lines, but if you look at other tafsir, in other tafsir like al-Biqa'i, definitely had a couple pages just on this ayah. But when I went to the other tafsir, they were, I guess, going in details in regards to the ruling on using stars and learning about the stars and galaxies and astronomy or astrology in particular. Okay, astronomy is different than astrology, because astrology, you're basically relating human life or the existence that we exist on, basically in this life, that there is something that we can read, and that these things basically control our energy and control our function and how we live our life, and that they would see it through the motion or the stars and their motion and what's actually happening up there. So they would regard that the stars and what's happening up in the stars and up in the sky is basically influencing the different choices, behaviors, and different actions that happen on earth. Okay? And someone might say, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ. And they'll say, وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ. Here's our evidence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about al-buruj, to meaning basically the skies containing the different buruj. What is al-buruj? What are al-buruj anyways? Al-buruj, they don't necessarily mean that the skies and the shape that the stars are in, that they basically relate to your life and what choices, and yeah, you're going to meet this person is going to be abusing you, or this person's going to be making you feel this or that, and etc. All of that is actually a form of shirk. وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ is not an evidence to prove that it's permissible to read human behavior or human life or future, whatever, and read through it, basically what choices and what things are going to happen and all of these different things. That's not what happens to affect human life. Okay. Now, when you look at وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ, can we use al-buruj, or at least the different shapes that we would see in the skies? The different shape. What do you mean? Well, those shapes, they're not the shape, but in order to study stars, they made basically a certain way of identifying the shape, basically. The shape, this is a scorpion, this is a, I don't know, the female, a woman that looks like she's carrying, I don't know, a scale or whatever it is. So these shapes were basically to help study stars, but it doesn't mean that these shapes are going to determine what you are and who you are. Islamically, to use astrology or believe in astrology, that it has the power to affect human psychology or behavior, or whatever it is shirk. Is shirk. There's right now a rising field. It's called, I think, astropsychology or something like that. There's definitely, that's pseudoscience. There's definitely no evidence to prove that, but it's pseudoscience. And unfortunately, you would see a lot of Muslims actually getting influenced with these cultures of shirk. This is a culture of shirk, to actually believe that the stars or anything in this world, even if we speak about rocks, if you were to put these rocks and certain rocks in your room, that it takes away the negative energy and so forth, and that if you were to put your bed in the corner, that there's negative energy and it's going to cause trouble between the husband and the wife and all of that, and all of those ideas about negative energy, okay, is actually shirk. It's actually shirk. Just keep that one in mind. We're starting to see that very often with of course, with the Muslim younger generation specifically, to get that influence of negative energy. And if you were to wear certain clothes, certain colors, and put the bed in a certain place, or probably get the stove near water, a water resource, that brings in negative energy, or that if you don't fold your clothes, it brings in negative. All of that is simply nothing but superstition. It's superstition. And therefore, believing in such superstition is to give these this matter or these things the power to control human life, to control basically things, and instead of connecting ourselves with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so when you look at the ayat, جعلناها رجوما للشياطين and جعل لكم النجوم لتهتدوا. What's the difference? So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically letting us know that there are a number of different reasons for the wisdom of the existence of stars. Number one is that it is for something that we would see through it, the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لتهتدوا بها. That's number one. لتهتدوا بها. Well, one, to see the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two, to find through the stars basically as a light and as a way to know our destination to things. What destination? Which destination are we talking about? We're not talking about destination that, yeah, I shouldn't be making friends today. I shouldn't be going to work today because according to the horoscopes, that if I go out today, that there's a high chance of me getting into a car accident and something happening, etc. So in that situation, yeah, I'll have to make very important choices in how I understand that I need to avoid any harm. That's shirk. That's shirk. All right. Believing in that actually prevents that person that believes in this, and the person that probably opens up their horoscope to read about that, it lets them basically not have their salah blessed for 40 days. Yes, their salah would not be accepted for 40 days. What do you mean not accepted? Should they stop praying? No, they shouldn't stop praying. Well, you just said that their salah won't accepted. لم تقبل له صلاة 40 يوما. You just said لم تقبل له صلاة. Their salah is not accepted. They would still have to pray. So then what is not accepted? That wouldn't be accepted unless they repent. That's number one. And when we say their salah won't be accepted if they were to continue on this path. And number three, their salah would not be accepted in terms of barakah. Okay, that's the third interpretation. And that's the same thing when we're talking about, for example, sharib al-khamr, a person that would drink alcohol. The hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that they would not, their salah would not be accepted for 40 days. Should they stop praying? The answer is no, don't stop praying. Continue praying. Il-farida itself, tasqut. In other words, it is considered that you had applied the obligatory action, but the blessing of it, the effect of it, the inspiration within it is definitely not going to be the same. So reading the horoscopes is definitely haram, and believing that anything has the power to affect human life. Like I said, whether it's a nujum, whether it's stars, or whether it's different things that you would have around you here and there, that's shirk. So what's shirk anyways? Shirk is believing that anything or anyone has the power to, one, control evil, bring good, bring a change in your life, change your past, change your future, bring you cure, bring you provisions, bring you, or even, so when we look at the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you've got two kinds of names and attributes. You have some names or some attributes, it describes the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. In other actions or other attributes, it describes what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would do to, for example, the different things in the universe. So for example, when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-mutakabbir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that has the pride. Okay? It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically having that pride. As-Sami', Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-hearing, all-knowing. Is that doing an action? Yes, it's hearing. Al-Basir, is that doing action? Yes, it's seeing. But certain actions relate to you. That's why he would be Ar-Razzaq or Ar-Razaq. He would be Al-Khaliq, the creator, the one to give provision, etc. So you could see there are certain attributes that relate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his entity, and other attributes that relate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his relationship with you. He's the creator, he created you. He's the provider, he provides you with that provision. He is the al-Badri, he is the one that originated things. Okay, so anyhow, when you look at the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, anybody claiming that anyone or anything that they would share the names or attributes with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a form of shirk. So what attribute is it being a shirk with here? For example, we're talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one to know al-ghaib, the one to protect you from evil, the one to protect you from harm, the one to bring victory, the one to bring good. That's only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Believing that anything, a rock, a stone, a gem, a star, a person, that they have the ability to protect you from any of that or bring you something good, etc., is a form of shirk, because it's believing that there's something other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having the power to bring you rizq, to bring you good, to bring you health, to bring you wealth, to bring you at least good things around you, etc. That's a form of shirk. That's a form of shirk. How do we do an istighfar for that? How do we repent from that? Is there an expiation that we have to pay? No, there isn't a particular expiation. Not all sins have an expiation to pay. In some sins, it's not enough to just do istighfar. Some sins, it's not enough to do istighfar. You have to pay an expiation. Pay? Like, what do you mean pay? Pay in donation? Yes, pay in donation. And guess what? Certain sins, they require a certain donation to be given to certain people, specific people. And certain donations, or at least certain expiations, they're not in donation, but they're actually in fasting. All right, so for believing in the horoscopes, there isn't an expiation in particular in terms of donation or in terms of fasting, but you would have to do three things. Number one, regret believing in these things, regret connecting to these things. That's number one. Number two, never going back to reading, for example, the horoscopes or believing in that astrology or all of that stuff. And certainly making lots of istighfar, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. Okay, what else? Well, you got to invest and put in the good deeds to wipe out the bad deeds. Because those deeds that you had committed, you would basically have to, let's call it, invest in bringing in more good deeds to cancel out the effect and the impact of the evil deeds, as basically whether it's reading in these horoscopes or probably believing in them at one point, etc. So here's another question. For example, somebody born in October or someone born in this month or that date, and we might say, well, these people, because they were born on this date, they have these behaviors. This person, ADHD, Pro Max, or whatever it is, all right? Or that person, they tend to be isolated, extroverted, introverted. They tend to be, these people, they tend to be, let's say, behave abruptly or whatever it is. Is it permissible to believe in that? The answer is it's impermissible to believe that there's any effect, whether the stars or any matter on us. So to believe that, yes, if you are to put a dark table in your bedroom, that the chances are that that's going to affect you and it's going to bring negative energy and all of that, and therefore you don't want to do that because it might harm the relationship between you and your husband. That's shit. But if you were to say that studies say that by having glow color paint, for example, okay, that it basically makes you feel better, it releases, let's say, this is not true, but I'm just, hypothetically saying. And they said, yeah, we did these studies and we had seen that, let's say, wallpaper or paint with the color pink or whatever the color was, okay, that it tends to make you produce more dopamine or makes you produce less whatever cortisol or whatever it is, or all these different things. Then in that situation, that interpretation would not be haram, okay? Because then you're saying, well, this is what we had seen in terms of in terms of an effect of, let's say, the pink color paint or whatever it is, okay, and what kind of effect. So you insist that, I would want to paint my house, let's say, a pink color or whatever color that you want, and you're not basing it that it's going to bring you positive energy, but that there are scientific studies that prove that this color paint basically makes people calmer. That's permissible. And another color paint, it basically makes you focus better or whatever it is. That's permissible to believe. It doesn't make this as negative energy or positive energy, but this is basically looking at it from the effect of perhaps the colors and how they would affect our mind. Let's say the color green, that, yeah, having green paint makes people focus better on their studies or what. This is not real, okay? I'm just hypothetically saying, okay? So in that situation, it would not be a form of tanjim. What is the word? Tanjim. What is it, tanjim? Tanjim is basically believing that the stars can affect our life. That's tanjim. Okay, let's continue to the following ayat. قد فصلنا الآيات لقوم يعلمون. Where's that right there? قد فصلنا الآيات لقوم يعلمون. What is قد فصلنا? What's the difference between قد and لقد? And right there, when you look at قد فصلنا, if after the word qad. If this is a past tense, then that is to bring in an affirmation. If the following verb that comes after the qad and laqad is in present tense, that is to doubt. So for example, قد يجلس أحمد على الطاولة. For example, قد يجلس. Then the word قد in that situation, since يجلس is a present tense, that means that this is doubting the possibility. قد يجلس. He might actually saw it. But قد جلس, that means I'm affirming and I'm letting you know that he really sat on قد جلس, let's say على الطاولة, that he sat on the table, for example. Okay. If after the word قد or لقد, or قد at least, not لقد, but قد, if it comes as a past tense, that's to show affirmation. If the word after it is a present tense, that's to show skepticism and doubt and doubting the possibility. So here, قد فصلنا, that's to show an affirmation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given the details. Okay? Given the details. What is فصل? The root is فصل. Let's write that down. This is important. لغة عربية, oh man, I love لغة عربية. Okay? I would have actually studied لغة عربية, but alhamdulillah. Okay, here we go. فصل. That's the root. What does it mean anyways? So the root فصل means to put a distinction between something. So فصل, to put a distinction between, let's say, A and B. Okay. فصل اللغة العربية الزيادة في المعاني في المباني زيادة في المعاني. You added a shadda right there. That would mean you're adding onto the root. Here we go. You're adding onto the root, basically, right there. Let's put it. Okay, here we go. فصل, you're adding that shadda. The shadda can mean one, a repetitive behavior done. فصل, what are we doing? The word fasala means distinction. To fasala, to distinct something. Okay? Fasala, to do a repetitive, it can mean to do a repetitive behavior in order to emphasize the distinction. Emphasize the distinction. Fasala, the shadda, could also mean a gradual process of something. Okay? Tasharraba, it took some time for it to fully absorb. Tasharraba. Okay? And the shadda could also mean to bring in an emphasis. To bring in an emphasis, to show that this really happened and it was so repetitive that I want you to know that this is right there something that for sure happened. Okay? Now, when you say fasalna, this is to mean, so which one? Number one, to give you a clear distinction. Fasala, give me with that shadda, that's in order to tell you that it was right there, not only giving you a clear distinction, but it was to lay out basically these distinctions. And fassalna is not only to lay out the distinctions, but to bring an affirmation. Al-ayat liqawmi ya'lamun. Wait a minute. So what distinction are you talking about? We're talking about the distinction of al-ayat. So al-ayat were basically brought in details in. Of course, that's what fasala actually means. Fasala is basically to help you recognize the right, wrong, giving you the distinction life, purpose, no purpose, justice, the definition of justice, Lord, or created by, or were we just there with no purpose, no Lord, whatever it is, all these different things? No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا. We basically brought you the different distinctions. We brought you in detail. Wait a minute, how did you get from فَصَّلَ to mean فَصَلَ, the root distinction, and now you're saying details? Because the second you distinct something from another, I'm letting you know the description that makes this different. So in other words, for you to know Iman, you have to know what kufr is. Because if you don't recognize the borders of kufr, then you're not going to be capable to recognize the borders of Iman. That's simple. In order for you to know what being good means, you have to know what it means to be bad. That's why Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman, he said, everyone would ask about the right things to do, and I would ask about the bad things. Not because he wanted to do them, but he figured that if I'm capable of recognizing what is bad, then I'll be capable of recognizing the borders of which I'm not supposed to be trespassing. So when you look at قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ, that's in order to let us know the details, the distinctions, to let you recognize where the borders, the margins, the parameters of the different things are at. Where was that described? That was described in al-ayat. So here's the thing. Al-ayat, the root is ayaya. Okay, wait a minute. So if you're talking about ayaya, you're talking about ayat. That's the plural of an ayah. Ayah is singular. So if it's talking about al-ayat, that alif lam right there is going to be either istighraqiyya or ahdiyya. Wait a minute. So what are you talking about here? What are those? So the al itself can mean that this is giving you all the signs, inclusive al. All the signs. Like what? Whether we're speaking about the open book or whether we're speaking about the written book. Written and closed. What written and closed book? The open book is basically everything that surrounds you in the universe. That's the open book. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, الشمس, القمر, الليل, الإصباح, الحب, النوى, all those things for you to see, study, and really see that those things cannot be functioning on their own, and that there is a creator that's making all of such energy, force, all of this to function. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the open book. The written book is basically the revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent. The revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent. So when you look at قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ, is this referring to the different signs in the open book, the universe, or the written book, the revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent? So where was this? لِقَوْمِ يَعْلَمُونَ. So now you could say, let's see right there, what did they want to say? Al-Qurtubi wanted to say, قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ, meaning we had clarified all of those basically signs in order for it to be something that would be clear, eloquent, in order for people to see through them the different signs, the different things that they could learn in order to not make the same mistake. لِقَوْمِ يَعْلَمُونَ. For who? For people that would know. Wait a minute, which knowledge are you talking about? Are you talking about the knowledge of ilm al-kitab? are you talking about ilm, the knowledge that you would have in terms of science? Both. But science on its own cannot get you to knowing God. Impossible. In other words, human intelligence, which was demonstrated basically in what we would know in terms of biology, astronomy, engineering, physics, whatever it is, and astrophysics and medicine and all of those different things, are they ever going to lead us to God? No, never. Absolutely not. How not? Why not? Because what science can show you is that there's a precision in this universe. What science can show you is that this world, yes, you can get to probably in astrophysics or biology or, just different sciences to get to know that this universe was created, or at least was founded, not on its own. In other words, what science can tell you is that this universe was not self-created, was not self-originated, and that is impossible for this life to basically come into existence by coincidence. That's what science can get you to. But can it at all one day tell you, yes, and this is God? That's philosophy. Okay? That's philosophy. To eliminate basically all the different ideas out there and consider one idea. That's philosophy. Okay? Yet, science basically just teaches you about the function of things. About the function of things, how they function, all of that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically sent the revelation, فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ, in order for us to understand why and how this existence had come into being, and that could only be known through revelation. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent the prophets and the messengers, because our own intelligence is not capable of getting to the conclusion and the full knowledge about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or about this universe unless the revelation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us here, what are we trying to get to? I'm trying to get to one key thing, and that is, in order for us to get to ilm cannot be just through science. That's one side of ilm. When you look at لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ, the inference that we're trying to get to is that true ilm could only be received through having the revelation. That's the true ilm. Does that mean science is not ilm? I'm not saying science is not ilm. Absolutely not. It's definitely ilm. But the ilm in understanding life, understanding purpose, understanding things about Allah, understanding the most important ilm is al-ilm that relates to ilm al-wahy. That's the most important ilm. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was teaching us in regards to قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ, or إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. What ulama are we talking about? We're not talking about physics, ilm, or biology. No. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. The ulama, it refers to mainly the ones that learned al-ayat, the ones that got to the revelation, the ones that learned basically what is beyond tajruba, what is beyond experiment, to basically go to revelation. Experiment is definitely ilm. There's no doubt about that. But the ones to go beyond experiment and actually get to knowing the purpose, knowing Allah, that's the highest level of ilm. That's the highest level of knowledge. The knowledge that you're capable of knowing right from wrong, truth from falsehood, and go beyond experiment to basically the revelation, al-wahi, the enlightenment through Quran and Sunnah. That's the most important ilm that you would get. So when he said, قَدْ فَصَلْنَا الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ, in other words, in order to be a part of those that ya'lamun, those that would know, you would basically have to be connected to the revelation. That's what would give you the ilm. وَهُوَ الَّذِي أَنْشَأَكُم مِّن نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ. And I want you to put a colon right there. When you talk about, okay, what ilm are you talking about? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, okay, well, the knowledge that we're also here talking about is the knowledge about what preceded your existence. That's right there. Here's part of that knowledge. But if you are a professor in physics or a professor in mathematics, etc., well, good for you. But if you couldn't even figure out your own creation and your own purpose, and who created you, how much of ilm do you really have that is bringing in the benefit for you? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes us to the origin of ilm, takes us back all the way and says, وَهُوَ الَّذِي أَنْشَأَكُم مِّن نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ. He's the one that created you from nafsin, from one soul. Okay, what is that supposed to tell us? It's supposed to tell us, go back to the other references where we talk to you about that ilm. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قالوا وتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك قال إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون وعلم. Here we go. Here goes that word. وعلم آدم الأسماء كلها. That's the true ta'lim. That's the foundation of it. But the most important ta'lim, let's go back to that ayah for a bit, right? Let's go back to that ayah for a bit. Let's say, what page is this? This is 149. Okay, let's look at this one. We're going to go back to what Surah al-Baqarah. Let's see. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ. No, we're going to go back. We're going to go back. Here we go. This is the ayah right there. Let's see. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا ثُمَّ عَرَضَهُمْ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ. He taught Adam the names of different things, and then he basically displayed them to the malaika. And he told the malaika, tell me the names of things, and if you are صادقين of what? We did talk about this in details, but قالوا سبحانك لا علم لنا. They said, all the praises due to you. We have no knowledge unless you had taught us of things, or accept what you had taught us. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then teaches Adam alayhi salam the names of things, and then tests Adam. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders al-malaika to prostrate for Adam. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Adam, now here's that piece of information. وَقُلْنَا يَا آدَمُ اسْكُنْ أَنْتَ وَزَوْجُكَ الْجَنَّةَ. I thought Adam already had ilm of things. Yes, but having the ilm about how things function and what these things are does not necessarily mean that that's everything in ilm. So that's why he said, قُلْنَا يَا آدَمُ اسْكُنْ أَنْتَ وَزَوْجُكَ الْجَنَّةَ. Now it's time to teach you something else. So you learned the names of things, you learned the function of things, good for you, but there's another ilm that is right there. This is قُلْنَا يَا آدَمُ اسْكُنْ أَنْتَ وَزَوْجُكَ الْجَنَّةَ. That's another inspiration. The ilm that you were given and the intelligence that the malaika even didn't have to learn cognitive skills, recognize cognitives and recognize names of things, recognize intelligence, and recognize experiment, etc. Good for you. But there's another ilm that is crucial to why you were created in the beginning. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْنَا يَا آدَمْ. Now this is the inspiration. We then told Adam, اسكن أنت وزوجك الجنة. I want you and your spouse to dwell in al-Jannah. And plus, we're giving you this information. وَكُلَا مِنْهَا رَغَدًا حَيْثُ شِئْتُمَا. We're going to give you the provisions. We're going to give you the food. We're going to give you the water. We're going to give you the resources. But part of the ilm, وَلَا تَقْرَبَا هَذِهِ الشَّجَرَةِ. Don't get close to the shajara. What does that mean? This is basically telling us that al-ilm consists of two. There is the ilm to understand matter, and there's the ilm to understand purpose. Okay? The purpose behind life. The purpose behind the different resources that we were given. What are we supposed to do with it? The purpose behind our free will. Again, the purpose behind matter, that's what you would study. And those things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you as the intelligence. You would, figure out what's the best way to do X, Y, Z. Okay. But Adam alayhi salam was then introduced to one key thing, which is free will. So that's why this ayah said, وَلَا تَقْرَبَ هَذِهِ شَجَرَةً. Don't even approach this tree. Why not? Do not approach it. Because then Adam alayhi salam was introduced that you're going to have free will, but that free will is going to be under two parameters. You're going to be, one, you recognize that I had given you the choice to choose as part of the different things that were given to you in terms of potentials, resources. But those resources that you were given, they're supposed to be channeled towards the standards that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to lay out. And that's why he said, وَلَا تَقْرَبَ هَذِهِ شَجَرَةً. I'm going to give you that free will, but you've got a responsibility. Do not eat from that tree. You've got a responsibility to make sure that you channel your free will and your resources to make it directed towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or else, فَتَكُونَ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. Or else you're going to be amongst those that are going to be considered as transgressors. Why transgressors? In other words, you had a perimeter, and then you were supposed to basically stay within that perimeter. You transgress that limit, you would be considered as part of the ظالمين. فَأَزَلَّهُمَا الشَّيْطَانِ. When you look at that letter fa, that tells us it wasn't too long. Not too long after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala letting Adam know the resources, letting Adam know that he's going to have a certain taklif, a certain responsibility. That fact comes in to tell us was not long after all of this being exposed and basically taught to Adam, that shaitan comes in, فَأَخْرَجَهُمَا مِمَّا كَانَ فِيهِ, and got them out of what they were actually in it. وَقُلْنَا اهْبِطُوا بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ عَدُوٌّ. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically let part of, because I want to look at the word here, قُلْنَا. I want to look at the word قُلْنَا. قُلْنَا is to tell us what? That there's an inspiration, that there was wahi in all of this. So قُلْنَا اهْبِطُوا بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ عَدُوٌّ. You needed to know, as part of al-wahi, as part of the information which and fits within قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ, is that there was one ayah that you recognize, okay, you're capable of doing certain things. Those are some of your potentials. The second thing is that you recognize who you are, what you are, and you recognize your identity right there, and you recognize that you've got certain potentials, and you recognize that you've got a responsibility, and there's a perimeter to live within. There's another key thing to help you make sure you're making the right choices. قُلْنَا اهْبِطُوا بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ عَدُوٌّ. We had said, اهْبِطُوا. What is اهْبِطُوا? اهْبِطُوا means to go down. Why are they going down? اهْبِطُوا بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ عَدُوٌّ, meaning you are right now going to go from one step to another as a result of what? فَأَزَلَّهُمَا الشَّيْطَانُ. In other words, your elevation and your descendants would basically be determined based on the application and your closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the application of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's standards, and two, the closer you get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the higher you basically get in knowing the world. Wait, where did you get that from? وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيَعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهُ. You have taqwa and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will teach you. In other words, if you truly want al-ilm is not only that experiment that you would do. Al-ilm, the most important ilm, is the ilm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent through al-wahy. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Adam alayhi salam, قُلْنَا اهْبِطُوا. You're going down. You're descending. بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ عَدُوٌّ. But I want you to recognize that you're going to be an enemy to shaitan, and shaitan is going to treat you as an enemy. But وَلَكُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُسْتَقَرٌّ. And on earth, you're going to have a place of mustaqar. Mustaqar. Mustaqar or mustaqir? We're going to get there. رواية حفص مستقر. But why did I say mustaqir? I mean, there's no qira'ah mustaqir. We're going to see in Surah Alana'am, where other qira'at actually said mustaqir. What's the difference? One is an adjective and one is an adverb. Wait, what's the difference anyways? Mustaqar is a place. That in it, there's mustaqar. There's a place of tranquility, stability, peace. That's al-istiqrar. And mustaqir, that you're going to be landing there. Landing? Yes, landing in terms of place. Yes, in terms of place. وَمَتَاعٌ إِلَى حِينٍ. But that's not going to be forever. It's going to be according to a certain limit, a certain appointment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had laid out. مَتَاعٌ إِلَى حِينٍ. It's going to be until and set to a specific timing. فَتَلَقَّى آدَمُ مِنْ رَبِّهِ كَلِمَاتٍ. Here we go. This is that wahy that we're talking about. Adam alayhi salam got the kalimat. That's قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ. كَلِمَاتٍ فَتَابَ عَلَيْهِ. That's basically what was going to get Adam alayhi salam through to repenting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّهُ هُوَ التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ. He is التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ. Here we go, continue. قُلْنَا اهْبِطُوا مِنْهَا جَمِيعًا فَإِمَّا يَأْتِيَنَّكُمْ مِنِّي هُدًى. That was that to Adam alayhi salam, or was that directed at us? Differences of opinions between scholars, but the note is, and the main theme is that فَإِمَّا يَأْتِيَنَّكُمْ مِنِّي هُدًى. That was the general rule. If you ever get the guidance, inspiration from me, then you would have to know that there is a default rule. فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Whoever follows my guidance, then they would not find fear and they would not live in sorrow. Okay, let's go back to that ayat that we were doing earlier because it relates to this one. Here we go. Look at this one. وَهُوَ الَّذِي أَنْشَأَكُم مِّن نَّفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ فَمُسْتَقَرٌّ. That's the same right there in Surah Al-Baqarah. فَمُسْتَقَرٌّ وَمُسْتَوْدَعٌ. Let's see what al-Qurtubi had to say about this. He said, وَهُوَ الَّذِي أَنْشَأَكُم مِّن نَّفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ. He said it was referring to Adam alayhi salam. He said we talked about this in the beginning of the surah. We're not going to get into all the details. But he said, for mustaqar, he said Ibn Abbas, Sa'id ibn Jubayr, Al-Hasan, Abu Amr, Isa, Wal-A'ra, Shayb al-Nakh'i, they read it as فَمُسْتَقِرٌ. And majority read it with mustaqar. Okay, so what are you supposed to get to here? And are those مستقر فمستقر ومستودع. Does that mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is promising us that we would find, according to the other qira'ah, mustaqir? That's their place of stability and their place of tranquility. So we should just not waste our time in navigating other planets to find a possibility of living there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, on planet Earth, that's your place of al-istiqrar. فمستقر or فمستقر. Okay, ومستودع. Other scholars, they said, well, this isn't necessarily talking about Earth. So what is it talking about? Well, they said, no, mustaqar, where this is talking about a rahim, the mother's womb, basically. Mustawda, they said, what is al-mustawda anyways? Al-mustawda is different than al-mustaqir or al-mustaqar. What's the difference? The word mustaqir, the root is qarara. What is qarara? Qarara means to land. To basically, when you see a rock rolling, we go rolls and rolls and rolls, let's say down the hill, and then at one point it basically just stops, it loses momentum, loses energy, and then it stops at one point. That's it, istiqrar. It just landed, lost its energy, and now it's in a certain position. Okay, that's mustaqir. Al-mustawda it actually means a couple things. Al-mustawda can mean a storage of something. What's the root? Wada'a. What does wada'a mean? Wada'a means to preserve something. So I would give you like $200 and I would tell you, I want you to keep this with you, please. I'll come later and pick them up. $200. I gave you this as a wadi'a, as a trust. Okay. But the trust is basically to store something, to preserve something. So al-mustawda, that's in order to tell us, al-mustawda is basically to tell us that the earth itself actually contains the resources that we need. You know what? I'm going to say something. I've not really seen any mufassir do that. I hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't hold me accountable for this. When you look at mustaqarrun wa mustawda, I personally relate it to, let's go back to that surah. What do we, remember this is 149. We're going to go back to Surah al-Baqarah. I'm going to go back to Surah al-Baqarah and I'm going to make a claim. I hope I'm not wrong in it. Okay. I'm going to make a claim. When you look at al-mustaqar and al-mustawda, I want you to look at this one. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِمَّا يَأْتِيَنَّكُم مِّنِّي هُدًى فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. When did he say that? He said that after وَلَكُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُسْتَقَرٌ وَمَتَاعٌ إِلَى حِينٍ. I want to look at this word mustaqar right here and al-mata'un ila hin. I want you to compare these ayat. Remember mustaqarrun wa mustawda. Al-mustawda, even though no scholar actually said this, okay? But I don't know if this is the inference that I got, to be honest. Because when you say you relate it to mustaqar and mata'un ila hin, wal mustawda, even though the ulama would say mustawda'un fil ard allati tamutu fiha. And the scholars, majority of the scholars actually said mustaqar, that since it was talking about you were created from one soul, they said, okay, then this is giving you the inference that your mustaqar, your place of basically dwelling for a certain amount of time, is going to be in your mother's womb, and then later on you're going to be moving basically from life to death, and that your body is going to be preserved in the grave. But if you were to actually look at the other ayat, when you, this one in particular, لَكُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُسْتَقَرٌ, that you would have on earth a place of istiqrar, a place of stability. When you look at the other ayah, why stability? Because the ayah later said, if you follow my guidance, لا خوف عليهم. Why did it say لا خوف عليهم? It's to emphasize that there's going to be al-istiqrar, there's going to be a place of tranquility. When are you afraid? Why did it emphasize لا خوف عليهم? Because whenever you're not living in stability, that's when you're afraid. And then متاع إلى حين, that's المستودع. المستودع is basically whatever is put in the storage. So متاع إلى حين is basically to give you, yes, here متاع إلى حين was also referring to death, that you're going to have a certain amount of resources to a certain amount of time, which is death. You're going to have a certain amount of provision that's going to last a certain amount of time, and this provision will end basically with your death. So that's mata'un ilahi. So when you look at mustawda, that's in order to let us know that you've got one, it is part, what am I trying to get to here? It is part of your human psychology that you're looking for al-mustaqar and you're looking for al-mustawda, that you're looking for stability. Your stability in terms of home, in terms of health, in terms of, there's no such thing as you just doing really nothing. You are looking for a way. Your brain is in full activity. Your body is in full activity. In fact, if you don't put it in activity, your body was designed to basically make physical activity. If you don't make this physical activity, guess what's going to happen? Your body, you're going to end up getting different illnesses in your joints and your heart and in your body, and you're going to end up basically exactly like if you were to put your car and not drive it for a long time, what you're going to do is that all the different things are basically going to not function anymore. You're going to need to give it a jump and probably take it to the mechanic, all of that, because that's not what it was designed to do. And the same thing with your body. If you're just continuously just sitting down and not moving, then you either use it or you lose it. Simple as that. So when you look at it, is part of our nature to seek al-istiqrar, to seek stability. If you're not using it, you're going to find yourself losing it. So what mustaqar and what mustawda? It is mustaqar and al-mustawda. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, letting you know, you're going to have these resources, food, water, all these different things. But then قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَفْقَهُونَ continues in the same way that the ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah were telling you. فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَاهُ. When you look at قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ in what way? فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَاهُ. You follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance. That's what al-ayat were referring to. How do I follow the guidance? Where's the detail in guidance? What is really expected of me? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَاهُ, and now we're giving you فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَفْقَهُونَ. Why لِقَوْمٍ يَفْقَهُونَ? لِقَوْمٍ يَفْقَهُونَ, for those that would basically get the ilm, just like as the ayah before, the only ones that really found. Look at this one. Let's go back to Surah Al-An'am here. The ones that got to the ilm and the foundation of ilm, the credible ilm, the most important ilm, which is about the purpose of your existence, which is about what you should be putting your energy in, and certainly what's afterlife. Okay, now that's that area that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had told you that that's the place of ilm. if the person did not put their place of ilm in the right place, then are they really going to have the right interpretation of the different things around them? If they don't have the ilm, then they're going to get into no fiqh. What is fiqh? Al-fiqh, in the beginning, or generally, literally, it means to understand. Later, it became the science that is responsible for deriving rulings, jurisprudence, Islamic jurisprudence. But faqquha actually means to understand and comprehend. So when this ayah, قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَفْقَهُونَ, that's in order to say, well, the ones to really fully comprehend the signs, the revelation, the purpose, and why they basically recognize and how they would recognize their place of dwelling and the resources and what they were supposed to be using them for. That's only going to be understood and fully comprehended by those that have al-fiqh. وَهُوَ الَّذِي أَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً فأخرجنا. Let's look, first of all, let's look at this one. أكثر أهل التفسير, they said المستقر ما كان في الرحم. Majority of the scholars of tafsir, they basically said المستقر is basically in the mother's womb. But here's one thing. And in مستودع ما كان في الصلب. What was in a sulb? What is a sulb anyways? So are we talking about the backbones? Are we talking about the vertebra? Or what are we actually talking about here? So a couple of things. When you look at al-Arab, and so that was even before Islam, by the way. Okay. Even before Islam, they would use the word sulb, and they used to consider sulb basically as the place that contains the fluid. We're speaking about what fluid? We're speaking about the fluid for creation. We're speaking about basically semen. Okay. And they would consider that, well, the sperm, it's in the man's back. And then الترائب, remember the ayah, يخرج من بين الصلب والترائب, as in Surah الطارق. يخرج من بين الصلب والترائب. That man was created between a sulb and the tara'ib. Well, what is a sulb? A sulb in itself. Okay, so this is definitely talking about the sperms. Okay, but we know that the sperms are actually in the testicles. So how do we understand all of that? So in general, a sulb, it became an expression for where the man's sperm originates. Okay, so we're talking about the backbone as to what you would see in the tafsir, or at least in the translation, and the ribs, الترائب are the ribs. So then in that situation, this is talking about the man's fluid coming from the backbone and the woman's fluid coming from the ribs. So, but what we know today is that the sperm is produced in the testes. Okay, and then of course the fetal development, the testes actually form near the spine and close to the kidneys, and that's only later do they descend into scrotum before birth. And this is quite interesting. You know, it's quite interesting. For the woman, the egg develops in the ovaries, which is located in a region that early Arab had used as the chest or a rib area. Okay, so just relate to, I guess, how, you know, it's quite interesting how the ayah actually said يَخْرُجُ بَيْنَ الصُّلْبِ وَالتَّرَائِبِ. Did the Arab actually believe that human beings are created from the back? So if it's quite interesting. I don't really know what the Arab used to believe in terms of the human creation, and what they used to believe in terms of where this fluid comes from. It's quite interesting, but they didn't actually they didn't believe that semen in itself actually contained anything. They just thought it's just some fluid, and that's basically that's it. And of course, on the other hand, you looked at the Greek, they used to think that there would be a very, 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 very tiny baby, and that's what is in the fluid. And then that later, this tiny baby basically grows in the same way. Not that it looks like what we know, something looking like a tadpole, okay? And that it would later, I guess, go from khalqa min ba'di khalq. A very interesting book. He didn't become Muslim, actually. It's quite, subhanAllah, I mean, and what was his name? He wrote the book on development of human embryo. Forgot what his name was. Maybe let's look him up really quick. Forgot what his name was. And let's see, human embryo and development stages. What was his name? Forgot what his name was. Maybe we could go like that. And Islam, maybe. Wonderful. Let's see, scientist. Scientist. Let's see. Embryology. Oh, this one's answer Islam. They want to start attacking Islam. Okay, let's go back to that one. Let's see, right there. Who was that scholar? I forgot what his name was. Somebody remind me of what his name was. He didn't become Muslim though, but he wrote this book about about the embryology and the different stages of development, and even included in his book about embryology and how the Quran goes in those details. I forgot what his name was. Was it? I forgot what his name was. SubhanAllah. Okay, let's see. وَلَكُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُسْتَقَرٌّ وَمَتَاعٌ إِلَى حِينٍ. Well, let's say right there. Can you give me the name? Kent. Was it Kent? I forgot what his name was. It's okay. All right. All right. قد فصلنا الآيات لقوم يفقهون. فصلنا meaning بينا وقررنا, meaning that we had clarified, and also قررنا meaning report and make a full and a complete assignment for that information. Okay, we're going to stop right here, inshallah, at وهو الذي أنزل من السماء ماء فأخرجنا به نبات كل شيء. Inshallah. Stay tuned for tomorrow. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, inshallah. MashaAllah, we got beautiful names, and mashallah, couple